and welcome. My name is Dr. Deborah Joy Perez, Assistant Vice President for Research and Evaluation at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Welcome to the Diversity Matters podcast series. Diversity and inclusion are core values of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, reflected in our principles. We value differences among individuals across multiple dimensions, including, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, religion, and socioeconomic status. We believe that the more we include diverse perspectives and experiences in our work, the better able we are to help all Americans live healthier lives and get the care they need. In service to our mission, we pledge to promote these values in the work we do and to reflect on our progress regularly. Now I'd like to introduce you to the podcast host, Jacinta Gauda, who is the Diversity Liaison for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Human Capital team.
Hello, I'm Jacinta Gauda, your host for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Diversity Matters podcast series. In these conversations, we talk with funders, grant makers, program directors, leaders, and subject matter experts about practical ways of recruiting candidates from underrepresented groups to increase representation in research, fellowship programs, and positions in philanthropy, academia, and healthcare. I invite all of our listeners to become members of the Diversity Matters online community and to join this conversation on diversity and inclusion. Our guests today are Gerri, President of OMG Center for Collaborative Learning and National Program Director of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's New Connections Program, and Edith Arrington, Senior Project Manager and Deputy Director of New Connections. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's New Connection Program focuses on bringing new perspectives to the Foundation's grant making. Under the leadership of the OMG Center for Collaborative Learning, the program supports researchers from groups that have been historically disadvantaged or underrepresented in research disciplines. New Connections is a key initiative in the Foundation's human capital portfolio, designed to expand the diversity of perspectives that inform the Foundation's strategy to bring new researchers and scholars to the attention of the Foundation. Gerri and Edith, thank you for joining us on Diversity Matters. Gerri, let's start with you. Please describe New Connections and its work.
Sure. There are several streams of work. One is a grant-making program for young, emerging academic scholars, diverse scholars in health and healthcare-related fields. These grants support their research, skill development, and mentoring. Our grants also provide other resources that help them advance their researching skills and academic careers. We have a track for junior investigators and mid-career consultants as well. We run an annual symposium in which researchers and grantees can learn of each other's work, network, build skills, and a coaching clinic in the fall that also helps to build skills in different practical, academic, evaluation, and research areas. We also have an open and growing network of people who are alumni and who have applied to the program. We offer them opportunities to attend training events and participate in webinars and other such things. We have about 100 grantees and about 1,200 members at this point in our broader network.
Can you tell us, our listeners, about why diversity and inclusion are so fundamental to an effective healthcare research agenda?
Sure. Quality health and healthcare research demands diverse perspectives from our perspective. Our grantees come from diverse backgrounds. They're racially and ethnically diverse. They're also sometimes the first generation in their families to attend college, or they may also be from low-income communities. Most of the communities in which the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation targets its resources and strategies for change are for underserved populations. It's our belief and the Foundation's belief that the people who know best how to create appropriate health care interventions in these communities are often people who are like the populations we serve. They know what questions to ask. They know the systemic issues that create barriers to access to good health and health care, and they have firsthand experience of racially and ethnically diverse systems. These are issues that have been in play for decades, and we have to address them, and we have to do it by working with people who understand them.
Thank you very much for that. Edith, what are the relationships between New Connections, the scholars that it identifies and supports, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation?
New Connections reaches out to a diverse network of scholars in health and healthcare, connects them to one another for mentoring and networking opportunities, and supports them in conducting quality research. We then bring them to the attention of the Foundation so that RWJF can use them as a resource in the work that they're doing to improve health and health care of all Americans.
The fact is that academia is not a diverse environment at present. We are helping scholars from diverse backgrounds to effectively compete, continue their careers, and stay in academia, not only to advance their own important research, but to hold and attract new students from diverse backgrounds, and thus to help ensure greater diversity in academia for future generations.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about some statistics about diversity in representation in academia.
Sure. One indicator that stands out is that only about 16% of people obtaining doctorates come from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds. That number is certainly not representative of the student body nor of the population at large, particularly today. In order to find meaningful solutions in healthcare, these numbers have to change. It's also noteworthy that there is a very low proportion of people from underrepresented groups who are successful in getting National Institute of Health grants. In part, that's due to disparities in access to networking and mentoring and to the whole pipeline of support that is crucial to developing an academic or scientific career.
One of the problems that New Connections attempts to address is this feeling of professional isolation among researchers from underrepresented backgrounds. Is this an issue that you hear often?
Yes, to some extent, the figures about academic representation and NIH grants speak for themselves. Without a strong presence and strong networks in academia, people from minority backgrounds can be discouraged from pursuing academic careers. We also hear from many of our grantees, as well as our network members, that when they come to our training events, such as a symposium, it's such a new experience for them because in a normal course of events, they're often the only one or one of only a few in their department who are not from the majority background, whether that is racial or ethnic minority backgrounds or being the first in their family to receive a college degree. So to come to a symposium or a coaching clinic where almost 100% of the people come from historically underrepresented groups, this is a big moment for our grantees and network members. The experience of connecting to people from similar backgrounds can remind them of just how isolated they often feel in their professional environments.
I understand. Given how important networks are to career development, are there some common assumptions about traditional networks that we could usefully critique?
Sure. Well, networks of senior people helping out junior people have been around since the beginning of organized human activity. And sadly, people tend to be more comfortable working with people from similar backgrounds. There are biases. We often have unconscious biases that are felt by people from underrepresented backgrounds. And network homogeneity can be self-perpetuating even in the absence of any overt racial or ethnic discrimination. We know that. We experience that. Senior faculty members are more likely to mentor people who have access to the same networks. Much of the inside cultural and institutional knowledge required to get tenure, to get research grants, is acquired through a networking process. Lack of access to these networks can be a serious career barrier.
Thank you. Edith, you mentioned the importance of early support for academic careers. What specific challenges do new PhDs from underrepresented backgrounds face in academia?
The challenges relate to obtaining funding to establish a research agenda, and part of getting funding, a big part of it, is getting mentoring and support, as well as networking that can help you to meet potential collaborators. Academics need support in order to do their research, publish their findings, and move up in the academic hierarchy. New Connections serves those needs by providing funding opportunities, mentoring and networking opportunities, and a high-level recognition and prestigious award.
Thank you, Edith. We understand you engage in extensive outreach through partners and alliances. Gerri, tell us more about that and about any noteworthy outcomes.
Sure. Outreach is highly effective and central to what we do. Our team does anywhere from 10 to 15 outreach events a year all over the country. These activities are useful for growing our program and the network, but also just for getting the New Connections name out into the field to serve as a resource for other organizations, our grantees, and their host institutions. It helps us to make sure that we're really reaching new voices and getting to the right decision makers. We have to go out of our way to identify the right venue to reach particular people too, and outreach helps us with this. For example, if you're looking to support Native American scholars, you need to connect with key hubs or people and organizations in that network. We have been able to establish a collaboration at the Native Research Network meeting, and we've cultivated that initial connection over time. We find that when we go back again, the awareness of New Connections and of RWJF has grown among that particular population.
Thank you. Edith, anything you want to add to that?
Sure. New Connections also engages in outreach to professional associations that span the disciplines in which we find diverse researchers working in health and healthcare. We work with the American Public Health Association, often hosting our coaching clinic in conjunction with their meetings, and with the American Psychological Association and the American Sociological Association. We've had sessions and symposia at various other professional association meetings, such as that of the Society for Social Work Research, because we know we can find diverse researchers across disciplines at these meetings. It was partly due to this kind of outreach that we had a rather successful call for proposals last year. We had the highest number of applicants we've ever had in the program's history. This helped us to reach our goal of having 1,000 scholars from underrepresented backgrounds in our network, a full year before we thought we would reach that goal.
Well, congratulations on that success. How do you identify the organizations that you will reach out to? Are there resources that have been helpful in identifying such organizations?
Yes, we assess the backgrounds of our grantees and alumni to get a sense of the disciplines in which they were trained and currently work. We then identify professional associations and their related conferences and meetings that align with the disciplines of our grantees and network members. Additionally, we outreach to committees or working groups in the larger organizations that pertain to diverse researchers. A recent example is the 2011 Convention of the American Psychological Association. New Connections grantees and alumni were featured in a symposium session on pathways to emerging leadership for diverse researchers. The symposium was part of the programming activities for one of APA's divisions that focuses on the study of ethnic minority issues. We have had similar sessions at the Society for Social Work Research, information sessions at the American Sociological Association, and have held our research and coaching clinic in conjunction with the American Public Health Association. Our grantees have been a great resource in letting us know which organizations are relevant to their work and might align with the New Connections program. We have also benefited from discussions with RWJF program staff about other RWJF national program offices or RWJF-funded programs that may be good for us to collaborate with on different efforts.
Thank you, Edith, for that. So what kind of resources does it take to implement this strategy? Financial, staff? What does it take?
So the main resources needed to implement our outreach strategy are staff time and direct costs. Staff invest time in communicating with grantees and network members about events and organizations of interest that may align with our outreach strategy. Staff also decides which events and organizations we will conduct outreach activities at over the course of the year, and that also entails us traveling to different events and conducting the various outreach events, for example, information sessions, panel discussion, or co-sponsoring receptions. Direct costs for outreach activities can include meeting expenses such as conference registrations, event co-sponsorship, audiovisual needs for presentations, and staff travel.
This is very helpful to know. Can you tell our listeners what are the major challenges to implementing this strategy?
Some of the major challenges to implementing our outreach strategy involve logistics, such as scheduling conflicts across organizations, and time constraints due to the programming calendars of the various organizations. Another challenge is the staff capacity to travel to various events while engaging in other major program efforts.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability. How do you sustain the relationships with these partners and networks?
We try to sustain partner and network relationships by having program team staff stay in contact with representatives from our various partner organizations and networks. We update partners and networks via our regular e-newsletter and communication and social media outlets. Our presence at annual meetings also helps to maintain the relationships.
I'm sure you've learned a lot in this process over the years. Can you tell us about the lessons learned from your outreach work that you can share with others here today?
One of the first things we learned was to cast a wide net when looking for organizations that could potentially partner with us on our work. We find out from our grantees what organizations they are affiliated with and if they have ideas about organizations that might grow and diversify our network. We've also learned to be strategic in deciding which events and organizations make the most sense for us to invest our outreach efforts given staff capacity and constraints.
Are there lessons from new connections that could help our listeners in philanthropy and healthcare and academia to advance their efforts in diversity and inclusion?
Sure. One of the big lessons for us is that there's really a strong need among young scholars for the kind of technical and methodological support that we provide. The skills that our support can provide help to develop are essential for young academics, and there aren't too many places to go if you're a young academic who wants to build these skills.
And I'd like to reiterate the importance of outreach. We need to know who it is we're serving and where to find scholars from underrepresented backgrounds across disciplines, across regions of the country. We have to know these things if we want to promote scholar development and bring even more diverse perspectives into the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Outreach and facilitating ongoing communication between the scholars and the Foundation are essential to our work.
Great, thank you. Clearly, technical support and career development resources for researchers as well as outreach to individuals and institutions are vital to building diversity. Gerri, but is there anything that grant makers need to be especially mindful of in their own methods?
Well, self-evaluation to us is essential. We're pretty tough-minded in that we've done our own internal assessments on a regular basis and acted on what we've learned from these assessments on an annual basis. Constant self-assessment has been very important in running an effective and relevant program. Probably 95% of our work is in underserved communities, so we ask ourselves a lot of questions. How do we make sure we have the right staff? How do we make sure we have the right policies? How do we carry out culturally competent evaluation and consultative practices ourselves? RWJF also sponsored a third-party evaluation that has been helpful to us.
Great, thank you. Very important questions. How might our listeners in academia, healthcare, and philanthropy start to think differently if they want to increase the success rate of young academics and increase the number of research grants that go to members of underserved groups? Edith?
We sometimes hear faculty committees or universities say that they can't find researchers from diverse backgrounds. Yet we have 100 grantees and alumni whom we've worked with for over 6 years, and a growing network that stands at about 1,200 diverse researchers right now. So we know that these researchers are out there, and perhaps folks need to think differently. The refrain should not be we can't find them, but rather, how can we better find the researchers from diverse backgrounds that we need? How can we work with them to give them the support they need to be successful?
That also implies facing some of the institutional barriers and historic issues that have kept people looking at the same kinds of networks and candidates and ways of doing business. Institutions really need to think a bit differently about personnel policies and ways of doing this business so as to connect, support, and retain scholars from many different backgrounds. One place to start might be to look at the diverse talent that's already in the system that they work in and tap into traditional networks to find out how to retain and attract diverse talent.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Is there a good starting place for recruiting committees and institutions that want to build diversity?
Institutions that are looking for diverse leaders, faculty, and staff need to be honest and address and ask questions about their own HR culture. They need to take really a holistic view. Do they have an inclusive culture? What inclusive practices do they have in place for identifying, recruiting, and then retaining people from diverse backgrounds? What kinds of messages are they conveying consciously, even unconsciously, with their practices? What kinds of clubs exist to support people from underrepresented backgrounds on campus and within institutions? What kinds of feedback channels are in place to help ensure that their voices are heard? There are so many ingrained practices that are taken for granted in academia and philanthropy that are by their very nature exclusive. This is where leadership can play an important role. It's essential to have inclusive leadership throughout the institution that will assess the long-term policy norms and practices with an eye to making them more inclusive.
Very good point. You're absolutely right. All the literature supports that idea that diversity must have a leadership commitment at the very top if it's going to be sustained. We've talked a lot about institutions and what they can do. Let's talk a little bit about the PhDs and researchers who are interested in strengthening their careers. Any advice for those who may be listening today? Edith?
I'd say to them, we know just by the fact that you've completed your dissertation and defended it successfully that you have a research agenda that excites you and that you want to commit to. What you need to do now is to clarify that research agenda, find colleagues with whom you can network and collaborate, and identify sources for funding your research. New Connections and programs like it can help with these things. We can help you to get to that funding, mentoring, and networking support, as well as help with identifying senior scholars who can help you to develop your career. Such scholars may or may not be at your home institution. You can come to training events like the New Connections Symposium to connect with folks there. Just be open to exploring the different options that will help you move toward achieving your goals. You will also need to have a very clear understanding of what's expected of you as a researcher wherever you pursue your work.
Very, very helpful advice. Thank you. Gerri and Edith, thank you very much for speaking with us today about the work of New Connections, about what other institutions can do to support scholars and researchers from underrepresented backgrounds, and what major grant makers can do to bring new voices to the research and evaluation agenda. I'm Jacinta Gauda, inviting all members of the Diversity Matters community to join the conversation. As a community member, you can download this podcast or request a summary of today's discussion. You can post your comments and questions as well as tips about diversity and inclusions and what measures are working within your organization. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a member of the Diversity Matters community, please take a moment to join today at community.rwjf.org so that you can participate in the conversation. I'd like to remind all of our listeners to sign up for notifications for our next podcast in this series on practical ways to increase diversity and inclusion in philanthropy, academia, and healthcare. Gerri and Edith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.